You know, for as much as I talk about anime on this channel, you'd think that I would actually watch more of it than I do, but honestly, in all of 2020, I think I've watched under 15 episodes of all series combined, but I guess that just kind of comes with the territory of school taking more time than it did before now that I'm home, and having to finish all of Xenosaga before Definitive Edition comes out. So I got my work cut out for me. I can catch up on all that stuff a bit later on, like, say, July, once I finish everything Definitive Edition has to offer. But anyway, I've talked about how anime the Xeno series is on multiple occasions now, and you probably already know how I feel about that, but I've never really talked a lot about making an anime of any of the games. For years, probably before even X came out, but that's kind of pushing things since I only got into the series with Chuck Conroy's Let's Play, and X had already been announced, I think, by then. But anyway, I've seen people talk about wanting an anime or some form of animated series of this Xenoblade game or another, but also just about as many people saying that they definitely wouldn't want one. This discussion died down a bit, and then obviously got a lot bigger again after Xenoblade 2 and all the discourse surrounding how anime the game itself was, but again, we're not getting into that because we don't need to get into that. The thing is, in addition to the fact that all of the Xeno games are anime-inspired games and have anime art style, so they're anime in that regard, there's also the fact that when a Japanese game studio makes a game that involves heavy cinematic style animation, like a lot of the scenes in a lot of the Xeno games have, they tend to get an animation studio that's also worked on anime to make those. For example, Production IG, which I don't think needs any introduction, did all of the CG and 2D animated scenes in Xenogears, as well as some of the more cinematic scenes in Xenoblade 1, and a studio called Studio Graphinica did the same cinematic scenes for Xenoblades X and 2. Now, Graphinica, you might not have heard of, because they don't seem to have as big of even a Wikipedia page as IG does, but they've done a ton of stuff. A big notable thing they did was actually they did some of the animation work on Expelled from Paradise, which is an anime movie that had the same character designer as Xenoblade 2, so they've worked with his designs before. They did all that game. They actually worked on Breath of the Wild as well, so they might be Monolith's go-to animation studio for that kind of thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if they worked on Breath of the Wild 2 and all of Future Connected. But they've also done a ton of support work on other series, like really popular stuff that you've probably heard of, like they did some work on Eizouken. They've done, I think, something on basically everything Studio Trigger has put out. So there's all that stuff. But then, like, the only other game they've worked on since Xenoblade 2 was Sonic Forces, so there's a bit of a sliding scale of quality in that stuff too. I just thought that was funny. That has nothing to do with the rest of the video. But anyway, there's no reason other than popularity that an anime of some sort hasn't already been made out of some Xenogame or another. Nintendo might have some control over the IP and be protective of it like they are with all their stuff, and Monolith might also be hesitant to branch out into multimedia again after what happened with Xenosaga, but again, it's not impossible for some kind of non-video game spin-off to the Xenoblade series to happen as it keeps growing like it's been, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was animation in some form. Honestly, I do think Torna could have worked pretty well as just a standalone anime movie instead of a DLC campaign, given the length of the story and the fact that you could skip some character and world establishment just by assuming everyone had played Xenoblade 2 already. I'm obviously glad with the game we got. I love Torna Combat, but I'm just saying, if they weren't already dedicated to that big of a season pass, they could have made it $20 instead of 30 and then just commissioned a movie from some anime studio, and it probably would have been just as good, honestly. But that's just the would this be able to exist at all thing. Because regardless of what you think about a given Xenoblade game itself, it's pretty obvious that any adaptation of any of them would face an uphill battle. First off, there's just the fact that video game adapted anime and JRPG adapted anime specifically tends to not be that great. Then again, there's the looming stigma of the Xenosaga anime. Anyone working on a Xenoblade anime would have that in the back of their mind, like, hey, the last one that was done about any of these games wasn't that great. And then anyone watching it who's a previous Xeno fan would put some additional expectations on it because not only does it have to be a good anime of whatever Xenoblade game it's adapting, it also has to redeem Xeno anime from Xenosaga, so that might also throw a wrench in things. And then there's also the things that come from adapting a Xenoblade game itself. They are long games, so basically if you ever wanted to get the story done, you'd have to adapt just the story cutscenes. And especially for Xenoblade, that's a very bad thing, because pacing. Xenoblade games are designed around having massive worlds that you have to explore in between doing the story things. So if you don't have something to break up all the story action and the monotony that's either exposition or just boom, plot event, plot event, plot event, plot event, the pacing just gets not good, and it would completely ruin the well-writtenness of any of these stories just by taking the gameplay out. So you'd have to have something in there, something that would take the space of exploration and normal enemy battles and stuff, and depending on what you choose to do, just adapting side quests wouldn't really do it, and that might break up the pacing even more. Additionally, they might have to not animate much more for all the major boss fights beyond just the beginning of the fight cutscene and end of the fight cutscene, which really, that's the other big thing of video game adaptations in general. You're taking an interactive medium and retelling it in a non-interactive one, so your own personal stories of fighting a given boss and that kind of thing wouldn't translate over to animation, so that kind of lessens the impact of major fights unless you pull off the animation, the choreography, and the emotional beats of that fight really, really well, which would involve expanding a lot on something that was already in the original game. It also would be harder to get as attached to all the characters, especially in a game like 2 that has a lot more, with less time to meet all of them, and without the additional charm and small character moments from stuff like doing side quests, heart-to-hearts, and all the battle dialogue, because likely a lot of that would need to be cut just in order to get an anime to finish at any point in time. I think it would be possible to avoid a lot of these problems, though, if instead of going for Xenoblade 1 or 2, which would be the obvious choice since those were both modeled after shonen anime, by making one in some way around Xenoblade Chronicles X. This will not have any spoilers, and I have two different options for different ways you could go around making a Xenoblade X anime. The first one is much, much bigger than the second one, and this was my main idea. The second one's basically another cool thing I thought about while thinking about this video. So my first thing, this is the big one, this is the one that I've thought about a lot, is a full TV anime series based on the game. This would very importantly avoid a lot of the pitfalls by not being a direct adaptation of just the main story of Xenoblade X. It would be a terrible idea to do that for X in the first place. It might be going a little far for some other people, but I think that the main story of X is like the weakest storytelling in the entire game, so you really, really don't want to focus on that. Make it seasonal though. I would like it to be long running because X has the most content out of any game in the series, and that would allow you to explore as much of the story as possible if you make it a large number of episodes, but don't make it weekly. Make it something where production can actually be good and have people take their time, because weekly anime, if you compare it to the seasonal stuff, I'm okay with only having episodes like a quarter or half the weeks of a year if they're much better produced episodes and the animators actually have good working conditions and stuff. So there's that whole thing. But about what I'd like the show to be about itself. Focus more on the side quest stories and the world building. Lean into the strengths of Xenoblade X without falling into the usual JRPG adaptation pitfalls. You could easily just spend a couple episodes on chapters 1 to 3 of the main story just to establish stuff, get used to the world and some of the main characters, get people who didn't play the game or don't know anything about the game and just say, hey, cool sci-fi anime thing with epic alien stuff and robots, get them up to speed with how the world works, and then just tell a bunch of interesting stories in the world. I could definitely see it as more of an episodic with overarching story type thing. A lot of smaller side quest chains can be done in a one-off character or monster of the week type format, and then some of the larger ones can be several episode long mini arcs. Every now and then, just like as a climax to a 13 or whatever episode core or a season, just tackle another story chapter or two to further the plot, and more importantly, open up things by introducing more of the world and characters and more things the main cast is able to do. So just say the first season gets 26 instead of 13 episodes. You can easily spend maybe the first 3 to 4 on the first 3 chapters, then just do a bunch of character exploration. Make episode 13 based around chapter 4, then focus a bit on characters who were just introduced or will be important in the future, like Lao, El, and Arena, for the second half of the season, and end it with the last 2 episodes being chapter 5, so you can end on that cliffhanger. That'll either be a play the game type ending if you don't get another season, or a great way to build hype if you do. You might want to go a little bit past the ending of chapter 5 though, just so the stinger for the end of the first season would be, the main character might get a skell, because that would almost be too perfect, honestly. And everyone knows the game doesn't end once you beat the final boss, so even if almost half the story chapters are done after 26 episodes, you can easily extend it to, like, 100, 150. You don't need to try that much to do that with X without including any filler whatsoever, other than probably expanding some story fights to make up for the fact that you're not playing them. There are obviously a lot of side quests that you shouldn't bother adapting, like the kill 10 Blattas, collect 12 rabbit diodes or whatever they are in Primordia. Don't bother with that, but there are a lot of stories that definitely do deserve telling, especially ones that would take a lot of advantage of the bigger production values since they were non-voiced, small side quests with little to no cutscene animation. Instead of expanding them into big voiced things in a remake or whatever, just make them the focus of an episode or 2 of the anime. That would be cool too. Like, with zero joking in all of this, you could dedicate an entire 13 episode core just to the missions surrounding Fog and Fry and their whole story arc and their conflict, and it would unironically be my favorite part of the entire series. So there are a lot of things you could do. If you want to focus on a specific optional party member, aka one of the ones that isn't part of the required affinity missions that you'd have to adapt if you wanted to get to a certain story chapter for things to make sense, or someone who wouldn't show up in that story chapter at all, you can just make one episode or so out of the first affinity mission you meet them in, then have them pal around as the member of the party for a couple Monster of the Week side quest episodes, just so you can see more of their personality and fighting style, get to know them better, and then just sprinkle in their other affinity missions along there just to cap off their personal story. And then even after that's done, you could still have them show up as working with the main character on other Monster of the Week stories, or even as a fourth in story missions down the road. Build up the massive cast of party members to the point where it isn't weird for any combination of them to be hanging out with the lead at the beginning of an episode, and then join them for whatever the mission or exploration thing of the day is going to be. The most astute among my viewers, which at this point should mean anyone still watching the video, might have noticed the fact that I didn't actually talk about the identity of this lead at all. And that's because I'm about to talk about it right now. The main story party in the original game is your Avatar, Cross, Elma, Lyn, and then sometimes you are allowed to bring a fourth party member with you for story missions. Usually you'll have a few characters who aren't allowed to be in your party, and it's either Nagi or characters who have an important role in that story mission that they can't play if they were part of your party, as in they show up and do things in it, but they act independently from your group. So Arena, Gwyn, Lao, Doug, they get that treatment a lot. So when you're adapting a certain story mission, those characters would definitely show up and do what you would expect them to do there. And because there's no real playable party and NPC distinction in a non-playable anime, you could give them more stuff to do, like give them a fight they didn't have before because they were incapacitated or somewhere else when the boss battle of the chapter, aka the one big fight in the chapter, began, so they could fight some mooks or join the main cast to fight whatever the big enemy was. Arena does some cool team-up move with Elma. I don't know, but that's beside the point, because you still need a main character. You obviously can't have them just be a generic blank slate, but I don't think it would be a good idea to drop a main character entirely and just pretend Elma and Lyn is all there is. I don't think 2 characters is enough to carry all the story scenes that are usually just Elma, Lyn, and Cross. Tatsu obviously doesn't count. And I think there should be another person present, rather than having Elma, who has a bunch of secrets about her, be the focal character for everything, and then, oh, the viewer doesn't know anything about Elma, but Elma knows everything about Elma. You need some sort of focal point character who doesn't know everything to find out at least some secrets as the story goes on. You could definitely make Lin the focal point and then bump someone like Doug or Lao into the third slot, but I think Lin works better as a supporting character, and I would want a main character who I would be okay with being in every episode, and if you make Lin the main character, that makes Tatsu appear in every episode, which no. You're basically left with three options at this point. Take one of the personalities Cross has based on the different voice actor options they have, flesh that out into a full character, make up a design to go with that and use that, create a brand new character to fill the role, or just put a different X character in as the new recruit to Team Elma. I want to go with that last option because there is someone who easily fits that mold, and that is Mia. I know I said no spoilers, but if you're really worried about even side quest spoilers, because this is not going to talk about main story stuff, then you might want to get out of here, just because I am going to need to go over some of that stuff, and some side quests you need to basically beat the game to do in order to finish explaining why I think Mia is a good fit. So if you're gone now, basically it's the fact that Mia can join the party if you finish her side quest chain and then jump through a bunch of hoops and do stuff. You could just take her and take all her ambition to join Blade that she had when you first meet her at the beginning of the game, and instead of having her go through that big side quest arc and then join as a hyper competent Blade member, just kind of take her, drag her, put her where Cross would normally be, and then wow, you have a character with a personality who people who played the game know and love, and then her arc can just be becoming a good Blade by actually being part of Blade. She's already someone who basically has the anime protagonist personality already. She's got all the necessary quirks, but she also has enough stuff about her that makes her unique and interesting to the point where she could carry a series and bounce off of all the many characters she'd meet. Basically, you can have episodes without Elma or Lin and still have Mia be interesting as the focal character. She has a massive drive to join Blade and explore Mira beyond just the whole doing the duty for humanity and finding the Lifehold thing. Her backstory speaks for itself. It's a very wholesome thing that you probably wouldn't find out in like the first episode, but at some point Elma's going to ask her why she's so intent on joining Blade after getting rejected all these times, and that's where you get that, and there, now you sort of understand why she's there. A lot of people would definitely be able to relate to her too, which is a lot easier than someone who doesn't remember anything. Just saying. Many scenes in X could be improved by the main character emoting and doing more than one of a few prescribed lines every now and then, implicitly, not even directly saying it. So, uniquely out of all the Xeno games, X would have the opportunity to make cutscenes better than they are in the original game, just because there'd be more interactivity between characters and it wouldn't be nearly as stilted. Mia has no story role, and the only quest you'd lose out on by making her the main character would be the set where you get to know her and then eventually get her as a playable character, so not really a big deal there if she's the main character and you'd get all that characterization and fleshing out of who she is just by her being the main character. And she has only one affinity mission, which is the smallest amount of any party member, and, you know, that affinity mission is just more of her character exploration and basically a one-off episode featuring the Nappan Tora, not the one from Xenoblade 2, a better one, and you could just, like, make that an episode of the anime. It's not really a big deal. She'd definitely bounce off of both Elma and Lin really well. Elma would be the straight man to a lot of her goofier antics, but still care about her and take her under her wing, while Mia would be the one to get her to loosen up a bit more, and Mia would definitely be the cool older sister figure who Lin would like to look up to. She would also, despite all this, still have a little bit of that player avatar audience surrogate thing, because she's still a massive Blade fangirl who aspires to join the group and would be amazed by everything she comes across. The only potential story concerns that would come by replacing Cross with a different character would be the fact that there are a couple reveals of things that are common knowledge to normal citizens of NLA, but aren't known to Cross and by extension the player, just because Cross has amnesia. So you could basically just make those non-issue things by explaining them right off the bat at the beginning, have Mia know about that, have the viewer know about it, have Mia maybe missed some important briefing or something because of the unorthodox way she joined Blade, and that would make her a bunch of different things. You could have someone ask her what she knows about Blade, and if she, oh, are you up to the task? Do you even know how Blade works? And then she'd rattle off a small 2-minute exposition explaining the division system, and you get that instead of the Nagi tutorial. And meeting Nagi is just a much smaller scene, so you could have the exposition to the viewer, not the exposition of something Mia already knows. There are a few things, but I think it's pretty easy to write around that stuff. You could also very easily just plop her into the story. Me saying, take Cross out and put Mia in, is almost exactly what you'd have to do. Just start the series off with her washing out of Blade training again, so she hears the report that some white whale wreckage might have been spotted in the Starfall Basin in Primordia, so on an overcast day, so she can't really see any of the scenery, she grabs the first weapons she can find, sneaks out past the guards, and leaves NLA to try and recover a piece of the white whale and go prove herself. But then she gets lost and stuck in the Starfall Basin, and discovered by Elma, who's on a mission there. Literally just have Elma still be looking for the pod Cross comes from, but by the time Mia gets there, and Elma shows up a bit later, the pod's destroyed, or it wasn't actually a pod, it was a false signal coming from a different piece of wreckage, so instead of picking up Cross, she picks up Mia. And because it was overcast when Mia first went out, once you get back to the cliff looking over Primordia, you still get that amazing scene of looking out over Mira that you get from the game. Mia would have never met Elma before this. She would have just gone through some recruitment person or maybe just Vandom every other time she tried to join Blade and washed out. So you get that whole thing, fangirling over meeting Elma, and then over the experience of getting back to NLA and saving the gate from being overrun by the Grexes, Elma would understand, see her potential, and then vouch for her, and Vandom would basically be like, yeah, you can join Blade on the grounds that you become another member of Team Elma, and then you can basically just kind of do the story from there. Once again though, this isn't focusing on the main story. Elma and Lynn wouldn't be around in every episode, and sometimes the episode would just be a party of Mia and 3 of the optional party members doing a 1 or 2 quest long chain for some NPC in a way that doesn't affect the overall story, but does build the world, and maybe add some new character who you can see as an Easter egg in the background in NLA in some other episode, or just do something that builds up the city. And you could definitely have a scene near the end of either the main story of the game, the last episode of the anime, or just some other big climax where you can see just shots of a bunch of all the minor characters who Mia helped out over the time, just doing something or being thankful for everything she'd done to that kind of thing. I also think it would be cool if over time Mia developed from using whatever knife and gun she stole when leaving the city into the Psychoruptor you see her as a party member once she joins. She already does use a knife, which is Cross's starting weapon, so boom, you're good there. But instead of starting with an assault rifle, maybe Mia takes a ray gun instead, because that's what she uses as a party member, and just kind of goes with it after Elma compliments her on being able to pick it up so soon, because from what we can tell, the default weapon, like the ones you get as a basic trainee in Blade, are a knife and assault rifle, so maybe instead of taking an assault rifle, Mia accidentally took a ray gun, and Elma was like, wow, you're pretty good at using that for someone who shouldn't have ever learned how to use that, and that's what prompts Mia to want to still use it, because she got complimented by Elma. And then, a big thing about X is how Cross is by far the most versatile party member, but building relationships and working with your other NPC characters is important too, because they all have 2 signature arts that you can learn from doing their affinity missions. Mia is no exception, so you could make a big growth moment for her. The climax of some major fight, like the Chapter 4 or 5 one, might be a good idea to get this at the end of the first season before things completely switch over into Skell stuff if you get that far. But have the turning point of that fight be her truly coming into her own as a Blade by developing her signature arts, and then in a battle using either Clarity Ray or Beam Bomber for the first time, and that being a big important moment for her and the fight. Or you could make her closer to Cross and switch between classes by picking up different weapons and make her pull a Goku. Basically, her special battle talent would be her ability to easily pick up things quickly, so she learns a bit about every different type of weapon from different party members and develops her own unique style for each one. And then the reason she's the best of all of us is because she was able to pick up everyone's signature arts, the things that they developed themselves for these weapons, and depending on which weapon she uses, she's able to use the abilities of all of her friends and stuff. In terms of animation studio, I didn't really think about this or figure out, yeah, I'd want this people to do it specifically. I just said this people, ignore that. Or I think this studio should animate this thing and then get these people to do the OP. Presumably, you'd use some of the game soundtrack for stuff and get Hiroyuki Sawano back for a bunch of other stuff because he already did the game soundtrack and he's an anime composer. And then you'd probably have other composers to fill in the gaps for different things. But you definitely want to get a studio that's really, really, really good at background art. Because if Mira is only a slightly bit less amazing looking than it is in the game, the entire point of the show, which is world-building Mira, would kind of lose a lot of its quality right there. Basically, my idea, my premise is, this is a slice-of-life show starring Mia, with a massive supporting cast of the rest of the party members and the big shots of NLA, and then an even bigger cast of one-off and minor recurring characters, but instead of being remotely rooted in reality, it is a slice of life on the planet Mira. Obviously, the fighting would still be a big element of the show, and take advantage of all the cool combat mechanics X has, and the fact that there are very few actual choreographed fight scenes in the original game, so there's a lot to be expanded on and a lot of original stuff you can do, so it wouldn't completely impinge on what the game itself does, and you'd still be able to do some cool stuff with that, but the battles and the action isn't necessarily the highlight. A lot of it would be the environmental art, it would be the world building, and it would be telling the stories of all of these characters. This is probably not what you had in mind when you think of Xenoblade X anime, but I think I would like it. I don't know. That's all that matters to me, so yeah. Anyway though, option 2. This is completely different because this is what you would do if you want to have some sort of animation be a thing used to either advertise or bridge the gap to a new X game. I call this the Pokemon Twilight Wings approach, because this is my idea for a series of shorts that basically completely apes the style of Pokemon Twilight Wings. Every episode would be 10 minutes or less and focus around a specific character or location and one or two key events in their life, while also focusing heavily on characterization, expanding a bit more on what they're like in the game, and lots and lots of fan service for very specific things. Like, there was an episode specifically for the Bee fans that was basically not even like sexy fan service, it was just, hey, let's watch Bee be cool for a few minutes. They made an entire episode that was, let's watch Wooloo be adorable for 6 minutes. Like, Wooloo being cute is the only thing everyone can agree about with Sword and Shield, so that kind of fan service specifically. Instead of being a small character exploration or revealing more info about a specific character like Twilight Wings is, though, make it more of a where are they now type thing. Any second X game would have to take place after at least a small time skip past the post-game missions of the first X, so this would basically bridge the gap by showing what all the individual party members or teams of characters have been doing in the interim between games. Instead of retreading old ground in a new way like the TV anime thing I thought of, it would be completely new content, either exploring characters more, hinting at new elements of the new game, or just world building on top of a huge amount of great world building that's already there from X1. I would love to see this too, of course, but the impact of, whoa, series of Xenoblade X anime shorts would be lessened a bit in this situation by the fact that this would be advertising a new Xenoblade X game, so there would be a new Xenoblade X game. I would be much more hyped about that than the anime shorts used to promote it. So overall, when it comes to anime itself, I would be much more hyped individually for the TV series, but in terms of which situation I would be more hyped for, TV anime or new game and series of shorts, I would definitely be more hyped for the thing involving the new game. But yeah, I don't really know how to end this because I'm not very good at ending my videos, and I very, very frequently forget to script anything to say during the ending, so it just ends up with me rambling for 20 seconds for the end slate, plus 5 to 10 more to show off my patrons who, I'm sorry, I've been way too busy to get things out early and, like, do any patron rewards, but again, classes end first, second week of May for me, so basically after a month, because I couldn't get internships or jobs over the summer for obvious reasons, I'm gonna have nothing to do other than play some Xeno games, so look forward to me probably getting videos done a lot more early. Goodbye, this video is over. Until next time, this is Luxon signing off. I like Xenoblade.